Hello Internet, good evening, welcome back to the dungeon. Today in my video I'm going to show you guys how I made these amazing ruins that I made with Hearst molds. HirstArts molds are great for creating fine details and consistent texture for your models. I hope you give them a try. I'll put a link down in the doobly-doo. And without too much further ado, let's jump right into it. To get started, I take the MDF board that's going to be the base for my build, and I organize the first layer of the floor and wall frame for my build, roughly where they're going to be. I then take this half frame made out of Lego pieces that I use to keep my angles straight, and I start gluing down the pieces, keeping to the general shape that I outlined at the beginning. Once everything is done, I start layering up the build. This means I add layers to the floor if I want to build platforms like here that I made for the altars, and start layering up the walls to give them more height. Now I glue all the pieces using silicone glue, like you. It works very well for gluing, but I'm using HirstArts molds to make this. HirstArts molds are amazing. They let you create highly detailed blocks to make models and build these out of, and I couldn't recommend them more. They're amazing. I have a huge set of them, and I intend on getting a whole lot more. Now, it's important to note that as you build up, you need to anchor the higher levels to the sides, to the bottom, and just to give it more strength, don't build straight up without any support to the sides. As you can see, some of the blocks that I'm using here look broken, and that's intentional. They're from Mold 75 that allows you to make ruined walls, but you can combine the ruined blocks to create whole blocks, which is amazing, and it gives you a very versatile block system. Again, kudos to Hirst, who makes amazing molds. And before you ask, no, I don't have a plan for the building that I can share because I built it kind of freestyle. I put the blocks in place, looked to see how it looks, and then decided whether to glue them down or not. But there's no plan. It's kind of just straight out of my mind to the board. Sorry. Now, some of you might ask, why are my plaster blocks green or yellow or red and black and not white? That's because I mix pigment into my plaster mix. It gives my blocks better definition so that when I look at them, it doesn't seem like a big white blob. Rather, I can see the shadows better and how they would look eventually. And once I start painting the model, if I miss a spot, then it'll be gray or reddish or brownish and not a glaring white, which means that I can mess up more and worry less about when I paint about missing the tiny spots or not getting the wash and all the cracks. So it works for me. Try it. Tell me how it works for you. Now, for the altars themselves, I took some of Mold 42's Gothic wall decorations to create the altars. I've used them before for a similar use and was very happy with them. They're very, very finely defined, very, very, very detailed, and I love them. If you need an altar, creepy altar, beautiful altar, desecrated altar, they do everything. When I was satisfied with the building itself, it was time to work on the basing. Just took some watered down PVA, put it on the base, and sprinkled a sand and gravel mix. Once the sand and gravel mix was down, I just sprayed it with isopropenol, and using a dripper just dripped some more of the watered down PVA mix. This will help just hold everything down. The isopropenol lowers the water's surface tension and allows the PVA to just sink into the sand itself and hold it down once it's dried. I black bombed it with matte black spray paint, and I used the burnt umber to base coat the dirt and the rock. As a base coat for the building itself, I used shades of gray, from dark gray to white, and of course forgetting to paint all the individual stones, but I'll get to that in one of the next steps. Now, to color the floor itself, I used pigments, dry pigments. Dry pigments are great because they give you a matte finish, not a shiny finish like acrylic paint. Just scrape the pigment off of those sticks and use a brush to put the pigments on the board itself. If you want to get a nice, realistic finish, use a multitude of colors. Let's say not just dark brown, reddish brown, but light browns. It takes a little longer than usual, but it gives a much more realistic look. When you're done putting all the pigment, just spray it with isopropenol and let it dry, and you're done. When the pigment is dry, I take some blended turf by Woodlandscenics and sprinkle it all over the build. And to create fallen leaves, I just take some parsley and oregano and sprinkle them around the build to create fallen leaf piles. I also use these nice seed pods that you can get on AliExpress and eBay to create some lighter variants of fallen leaves. Making sure to just sprinkle them randomly around. When I'm done sprinkling the blended turf, parsley, oregano, and seed pods, I spray them with the isopropenol exactly like I did with the sand mix, and drip some watered down PVA on top of them. This will seep into the blended turf and help it connect with the base, sand and gravel that I put earlier, and hold everything together. And this was when I remembered that my walls are really, really, really monotone, that I should have colored individual rocks to give them a bit more flavor and a bit more uniqueness. So I just went over specific rocks with some browns and beiges and grays to give them a little more definition, making them a little bit more unique and breaking up the monotoneness of the build of the walls. And then I went over everything with a dark wash. By everything I mean the walls, yeah, not the greenery. This is just regular dark wash that I made from watered down acrylics. When the wash was dry, I decided that I wanted to make some grass tufts, but I didn't want them to cover the entire build. So I just took my PVA bottle and made a couple of spots of PVA and used a mix of static grass fibers of different lengths and different colors to create these realistic looking grass tufts using 12mm to 5mm of fiber. After shaking all the fibers, it was time to put in the trees, shrubs, and vines. To make the tree, I just used a dried up rosemary branch that I dipped in the watered down PVA and let dry. I think the rosemary has a very gnarled branch system, and I love using their branches for trees and for bracken. They look very well. Now, to create the shrubbery, I just used some clump foliage, again by Woodlandscenics. They have great products. And then it was time to move on to make the vines. To make them, I just used dried up roots that I found in my garden, glued them down with some super glue, and then glued them to the walls with the same super glue, hiding it with some clump foliage. Now this is a nice trick that lets you glue the roots firmly to the walls without getting blobs on the walls, and giving your vines a more lively look, because the clump foliage looks like the vine leaves. I also made sure to wind up some of the roots around the tree to make it look as if this tree has been dead for a while and the vines have been crawling up its trunk. When this was done, it was time to put in some flower tufts that I've made, and I made them exactly like I made the grass tufts, only I made them on a piece of parchment paper and then took them out to glue them here. To finish up, I took some random pieces of bark and branches that I found in my yard and glued them around to create some piles of deadfall. This really enhances the forgottenness of the entire build, and I really like it. But it's also important that when you're done adding these, add a bit more shrubbery around them to make it look like they fell on top of the shrubbery and then that the shrubbery grew around it, not somebody just stuck them there. And that's it. That's how I made these amazing ruins. I hope you've enjoyed the video and if you find it helpful in some way. And if you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And consider becoming a Patreon in our Patreon link down below. And I hope to see you here next week. Bye. Now, I actually made this piece in this video originally for my nephew, whose birthday came up and asked me to give him a ton of blocks. So I sent him the blocks. I sent him the picture of the church, the ruined church, and he liked it so much that he made his own, and he wants to buy molds now and start crafting. So I'm pretty happy with it.